And we're going to work it a little bit different. We're going to have a few talks up front to give you some information to everybody, and then we're going to split up in the end, and we have 4 tables with all of the volunteers. Can all the volunteers that are here raise their hand, stand up and raise your hand? They're going to talk. So all these folks have been with us for 3 years since they announced this monstrosity through Cleveland and McLean counties on February 22nd of 2022. Most of us were impacted or are still impacted, and we want to stop this. And so we're here to give you information. I want to be clear that when we talk to you tonight, we are giving you information based on our 3 years of research. So some of us have put thousands of hours in to try to understand the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, and there's lots of resources for you. And the best way that you can help is to read all the information, watch our information, learn about it, and so you can find the best way to help not only yourself, but your neighbor. And so my name is Amy Serrato. I'm the president of PikeOffOTA and the Oklahomans for Responsible Transportation, and I'm a civil engineer. And so when I found out about this 3 years ago, I had several things that popped through my head saying, 1, this is not typical civil engineering. 2, it's completely unethical from an environmental standpoint. And 3, there's absolutely no justification for these turnpikes. And it took me 3 months to figure out that it had nothing to do with transportation and everything to do with economic development and the transportation cartel. And so while I know some of you are going to be cynical about that and maybe take a few months to really understand what's happening, the OTA is hosting 2 town halls that say they want your input. And those are on May 19th and May 21st. We're here tonight to give you some information that you can take to those town halls to understand what they're truly telling you. They will not release the route. They will not, because they don't want you to be angry. They want you to still have a shred of hope that it's not going to be taking your home. But I'm here to tell you that we know pretty conclusively where that southern route they want to put it, but we also think that the southern route will never be built. But it won't be built because we're going to keep fighting. And if we stop fighting, they will build it. And so we need you to stick with us and make sure your community is really strong and very informed. And so who has signed up for our Pike Off OTA newsletter? Okay, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, on our website, pikeoffota.com, you can click sign up, put in your email, and we'll be emailing you. We also have what's called a Substack, and I put out a Substack today on the Turnpike Truth Summit, and I tell you where we think the route's going to be. And so I'll tell that to you now so you don't have to just read it right now when you're sitting here, but you need to sign up for that Substack because I put out some pretty long-form, informative information that helps you understand what you're up against. So we have a frequently asked questions from several of the other town halls, and the first thing everyone asks is, where is the route? So again, I'm not the OTA. I'm someone who studied the OTA, but we have good information that the OTA has contacted property owners between 48th and 60th to try to purchase their land, the large tract land, so 80 acres, 100 acres, 70 acres. There's 4 people who have contacted us. So we're pretty confident that they don't want your input in the end of May because they already know what they're going to try to do. And that doesn't mean that people that are here between 60th and 72nd have to walk away and have a sigh of relief, because we need you when we go back and sue them in state court and federal court. And the only way that we can stop them is to either change the statutes at the legislative level or take them to court and get an intellectually honest judiciary that will rule with the law. And so that's what we're going to do. And of course, you know, we took them to the state Supreme Court in 2023. We had an excellent case, and we, in a split decision, 6-3, lost that case, which we said that they didn't have the legislative authorization to build the southern extension, and they didn't have the legislative authorization to build the east-west connector for several different reasons. But we hope that, and Rob Norman, our lawyer, is going to talk to you more about that in a little bit, about the legal proceedings and where we plan to go. But we are working together with are federal agencies to try to get some information about why the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority thinks they can build a 7,000-foot bridge across the South Canadian River without a permit. We are working with the Securities Exchange Commission to understand why the Oklahoma Turnpike thinks they can have violations in their trust agreement and lie to their bondholders. And we have discussions with a lot of other agencies about what's happening with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And so if you don't understand or don't know the history of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, I encourage you to read the Substack and read our website, because it's a sordid history that started back in 1947 under Governor Turner, and everyone knows that the turnpikes were supposed to be free when they paid off the bonds. But because of cross-pledging, which means they can use their very well-funded turnpikes like the Turner and the Will Rogers and the Kilpatrick to pay for all the other turnpikes, they can in perpetuity keep refunding their bonds and keep that on the money train so they don't ever have to turn that back over to the state. And so right now they need bond money, and that's why they're proposing these new turnpikes, because there's no traffic justification. There's no need. I mean, who took Route 77 to come here today? 4 lanes. 4 lanes. I drove it 6 times going to track meets in the last 2 weeks. I never once let my foot off the gas underneath the speed limit. And so we already have a brand new bridge across the South Canadian right here. We don't need another one a half a mile north. And so who in this room is directly impacted in terms of your property, your house? Would be, okay? And who's within a mile either way? Right. So it's our neighbor, it's our peace of mind, it's our environment, it's our air quality and light quality, and it's where we moved to live in peace. And so we are very, very, very hopeful that we can stop this. So I already answered the first frequently asked question, where is it going to be? So we think it's going to be between 48th and 60th. We are not the official be-all, end-all. We're not the OTA, but we're pretty sure we know that. Someone asked, why doesn't it go to the east side of the lake? We believe it's not going to the east side of the lake, which would be out of the watershed, impact many less homes, and make more sense coming down off the Kickapoo, because there's tribal land there, and they tried that in the 1990s, and the tribes came up hard against it, and they don't want any pushback. So they are not thinking about east of the lake. Another frequently asked question is the timeline. So the timeline is far. So they're going to hold us in limbo. They've been holding us in limbo for 3 years. It'll be another year or a year and a half. And so I don't want you to think that this is a sprint. This is a marathon. So get ready to be able to work in the legislature, work in the legal realm, and stay connected with us. We're a big community. We have fantastic events. We have a lot of information, and we really need to lean on each other because it's extremely stressful. A lot of us probably are suffering from a little post-traumatic stress disorder from the amount of stress that we had when it's coming through our home. We think, they can take your job, they can take your money, but for some reason when they come for your home, it just hits a little harder. And so you need to take care of yourselves and make sure your mental health is okay, and lean on your community to talk about it, because that's what I had to do for the last 3 years. And we've got people in the room that have been fighting this since the 90s. So Dave Moore has been fighting this since the 90s. He's collected all of these articles, old articles about how they beat the loop in the 90s. So I want you to take a look at all of those articles and see what we've accomplished in the past 3 years. So for the first time in history, we got an investigative audit called for by the Attorney General. 3 years ago, the same man was in charge of ODOT, OTA, and the Secretary of Transportation. We got an opinion by the Attorney General that removed that, and he had to resign because that's not okay. We won in summary judgment in district court, which was overturned by the intellectually dishonest state Supreme Court. That's being nice. We've done so many fantastic things that no one else has been able to do because our community kept moving. And Dave always says that you only lose when you stop fighting. and I believe that to be true. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Tassie Hirschfeld, who is a professor of anthropology and was impacted by the Southern Extension, was our lead plaintiff on our summary judgment win in district court. She's an expert in lots of interesting Soviet Union communist behavior that is likened to the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And so I think you'll find what she has to say great. Tassie?
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'm checking my watch because, as most college professors, I'm programmed to speak in 1 hour increments, and I realize that is too much. So I'll do my best to stay within the 10 minutes. What I had wanted to share with you were both some lessons from history and also some things that I wish that I had known before I went to that first public OTA meeting. Because I think all of us, when we showed up there, two things happened. One, we went from table to table and we got no answers to our questions, and we got more and more frustrated, and we were asking very sensible questions like, have you thought about the watershed? And why are you ambushing us with this? Why was there no community involvement? And what we got back was stonewalling, grouchiness, avoiding us and the issues, and just repeating these canned talking points that were just designed to confuse and deflect and redirect. So when I would say things like, how can you put a turnpike right next to my house without telling me? They would say, well, it's not final yet. We don't know where it's gonna go, honey. So you just don't worry your pretty little head. And once the route's final, then we can talk. It's like, no, I'm not buying this. And so we've been through many rounds of this. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up that my biggest lesson from history I can share with you, and it's a difficult one, in some ways the hardest one. They don't care. They do not care about the watershed. They do not care about how wonderful your homes and farms are. They don't care about how important it is to you. They don't care about due process. They will try and get you the lowest possible price if they move to an eminent domain taking. They could make this easier by following the Federal Uniform Relocation Act, which state agencies that take federal money have to do. They're not doing that. They are choosing to make this as difficult and unpleasant for you and the community as possible. And these are very special properties, so it's a hard lesson from history. But I can tell you, having gone back and read the newspaper coverage of the Creek Turnpike when it was built in Tulsa in the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was a quote that they interviewed as a pastor, and they had taken his church for that turnpike. And his direct quote was, "These are the most dishonest people I have ever dealt with in my life." And 3 or 4 years later, when they built the extension to the Creek Turnpike, he still had not been paid. They were dragging it out in court as long as possible. And it just gets worse and worse. And he wasn't the only one. Just that quote just really hit me hard. It's a pastor and it's a church, and you would expect better. And when we move on to the Kickapoo, it's the same story. The people there were so traumatized by the way that they were treated by this agency. Ambushed, sneak attack, vague about the route until it's final. And then there's this big unveiling, and everybody has a heart attack and passes out and gets incredibly upset. And they file a lawsuit, and they drag it out in court, and they're already moving ahead to get properties, and there seems to be just like an unstoppable machine of land grabbing. Just imagine this, my mental metaphor is an octopus with 1,000 tentacles. And so that lesson from history, again, is they got away with it with the Creek, and they had no hesitation about using that same playbook with the Kickapoo. And then, again, our giant land monster is so stuffed full of property. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go grab some of Cleveland County now. Boy, does that look delicious. And so just a few years later, it's our turn. And so I'm telling you this again because it's background. It will help you just sort of get in the right mindset for when you go to these meetings to understand that whatever trauma, grief, need for logic need for things to make sense that you bring to them. They are just going to come back to you with these same talking points, and you will not get a satisfactory answer. So if you can just reset your expectations and get that in your mind, you'll be in the right state to sort of, get through that process as painlessly as possible. But the other things that I think are important lessons from history, too, like we know their playbook now. They work by sneak attacks in the dark of night. There's a lot of backroom deals, and they cannot work in the public eye. And this is where I think our group has been so successful, and I'm very grateful to Amy for going through that list of successes, because again, when you're fighting, something that's sort of this big and this powerful, it's easy that you just start to feel puny over time and tired, because we're all volunteers. We're tired. But we've had some big wins, and it's because now we know their playbook. We can anticipate, and we can get out ahead. And that's what this meeting is for here tonight. So no sneak attacks when the people are as informed as they can be. So if you know the playbook, going in, do not expect a straight answer from them, and do not necessarily expect to be treated well if they come to you and make an offer on your property. They will promise you lots of things. Will they deliver? Not necessarily. And if you challenge them, you might see a different side, because there's a huge range of experiences that people have had, ranging from relatively painless, they weren't that attached to the property, to this was a nightmare that went on for years and years and years, and nobody deserves to be treated that way. So knowing the playbook, you can anticipate a little bit and get out ahead, and knowing they can't work in the public eye, we will invite all of you to record your interactions, to not let them hide in the dark of night. Don't let them sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we'll give you something special. You have to sort of get all of that information that you can. If you are up for it, share it with us. We will compile it, and that way we can make sure that you're getting the same offer that you're getting, and you're getting the same offer that you're getting. And there's not that same potential for this kind of backroom, we're going to see what we can get away with type activity. So the other parts of their playbook that I think are also important, the law is on our side overwhelmingly. And so when we make them come out into the public eye, and we remind them, which our wonderful attorney Rob Norman will do in just a few minutes, of what the law actually is and what it says, that means that they have to really bend the law, and they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to an enormous team of attorneys to try to bend those laws. But even just from a basic common sense understanding, if we zoom out, it makes no sense to ambush a community with a highway. You don't do things that way. I am a professor of anthropology. I have some friends who used to work in international development, and if the World Bank were planning an infrastructure project that was going to displace hundreds of people, they would have an advance team out 6 months ahead of time just to measure the mood in the community. How do people feel about this? Is this going to be successful? Can we do outreach to anticipate any problems that might come up? That's not what's happening here. They will not invest that time, energy, resources to make this process painless. They are doing, again, sneak attack, dark of night, bend the law, see what they can get away with. But this time, I think they've just met enough committed opposition that it's going to be increasingly hard for them, and the more people we have and the more momentum we have, the better chance of success. And I'm going to talk very briefly about some of those successes, because those are really important and they're worth going over again and again. I was the lead plaintiff on the open meetings case, and when I say sneak attack in the dark of night, every piece of evidence that came out in that open meetings case absolutely validated. They planned this in secret starting in 2021. After the case was adjudicated, we finally got the open records I had requested a year before, and it was all in the emails. They called it Driving Forward 2. You've never heard that word before. I hadn't until I saw it in an email. It became Access Oklahoma. They rebranded it and then pretended that it was brand new. So again, the more we can sort of force their actions, words, deeds out in the public eye, the more evidence we have to get to our attorneys to validate and verify the importance of the law, what the law is, how they're trying to bend it. And so for all of that, we just really thank you for showing up. That's always the first step. Second step is get to know one another, take part in this community. And third step is never give up, because I really think we're going to get them this time. So thank you. And I will turn it over to the amazing Rob Norman.
Okay, when do we want to get everyone at the tables? Have we got a time so I can? Okay. Oh, am I going to do a song and dance? Okay. We'll go 6:35. Okay. Okay. Good. Then I kind of know my time, so if I'm getting there, just make me shut up. Anyway, yes, it's always good luck with that. Some of you know me. I think some of you don't. I'm Rob Norman. I'm an attorney who works in an Oklahoma City law firm and lives in Norman. How about that? Norman in Norman. What I started in this is my first involvement in this was going to a Cross Point church meeting right after this was publicly announced. And what a lot of people were doing was they were coming up to me and saying, boy, there's going to be these turnpikes coming through, and we're going to need lots of lawyers to give help in eminent domain. And there's going to be this meeting at Cross Point Church, and just letting you know that. And so I decided to go. And I had looked at it a little bit beforehand, but not a lot beforehand. And what this turned into real quick, is Rashard still in the room? There we go, right straight in front of me. Yes. And Rashard was up on the stage with the OTA's contractors. And we got the sense real quick that the OTA had come looking for capitulation and a white flag. And it real quickly became a case of that's not what this is about. This is about stopping turnpikes. And not just being there for an eminent domain case. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that progression, go back a little bit over the cases, and then talk about how this ties into the future. What we're talking about, of course, being here in Purcell is the South Extension, which is a ways off. And Amy told you they think it's going to be between 48th and 60th where it's up in Norman. We don't know exactly how that would affect how it would end up in Purcell, whether it would cross in the same place, whether it would end up in the same places in Slaughterville and McLean County and places like that. That's yet to be determined. But the 48th and 60th route is in the court cases. That's where we found out they were originally wanting to put it and drew it up in the 90s. And then they came up with another idea when they announced it. So we got into these court cases. There were two strains. There were the Open Meetings Act case, which Tassie told you about. And then there was the case that said, you just can't do these turnpikes, which Amy told you about. And in both cases, what I like to say is all we had on our side was the law and the facts. And that's supposed to be it. At that point, you're supposed to say the law is on your side, the evidence is on your side, the facts are on your side, you win, right? Well, unfortunately, so often that's not how our legal and our justice system works. And you have to realize that what we came up against essentially was an unaccountable power. And basically that unaccountable power just came to the court and said, we are the OTA, we build turnpikes, we say we can build these. And they got, in one case, 5 who said okay, and in another case, 6 who said okay. What we like to think of is that the intellectual leaders of the court, 2 of whom are now the Chief Justice and the Vice Chief Justice, were on our side and said, hey, intellectual honesty tells us they can't do these turnpikes. And we had, in our case that said you can't do these turnpikes, we had a judge come up from the Court of Civil Appeals who had a background as a very smart judge, a very good judge about following the law, both as a lawyer and a judge, and she sided with us too. But nevertheless, we lost those cases, the Open Meetings Act case, the you can't do these turnpike cases, and things moved on. But as you saw, we didn't quit. That would have been the easiest thing to do. And now I'm going to tell you, we're not going to quit, and we're looking for a rematch. That's what you look for. I mean, who's seen that picture? You know, some of you older people, some of you maybe even younger people, have you ever seen that picture of old Cassius Clay and Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston? He's out. That's where we felt we are. We clearly won. We knocked out the OTA. But judges decide our fate. And in a split decision, they decided, oh, no, you didn't knock them out. Not only did you not knock them out, you lost the fight. But we feel like we can get a rematch scenario here. And this is kind of how it goes. The OTA was denied, and again, I'm going to tie it into the South Extension for tonight's purposes, because that's kind of what we're dealing with here in McLean County and Purcell. To tie it into the South Extension, what's going on is they're changing the route. They are changing the route drastically from what they presented to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, because the Federal Bureau told them that they can't do their route right up against the lake and go over federal lands. So now they're having to move it. And so even though we had that case and we lost that case in a split decision, we want to get to a point where we say, we can do this again. And we already know that one of the justices who was on the side of the majority is gone, voted out in the retention election. Two others who voted with the majority barely slided through. In other words, all three of the justices who were up on the retention ballot, you may remember from the last election, they voted with the OTA. One of them lost, the other two almost lost. So we've changed the composition of the court a little bit. We're down from 6 to 5. We don't know where the new one's going to go, but we know we've changed the composition of the court a little bit. We've got a really changed route. So maybe those of you who are in the way now of the new route, or maybe in the way of the new route and thought you were okay, this is kind of the theory. Those of you who may find yourself in the crosshairs now can say, hey, wait a minute. We had a right to think we were in the clear in that case. So we can come back to court if we want, if we're impacted by this new route, and say that case was wrongly decided and take another shot at it. And there have been some changes in the law since then, not in Oklahoma, but at the federal system. You may have heard a little bit of it. You may have heard us talk about it in other areas, the Chevron case. It used to be there was a doctrine that said that federal courts and state courts would borrow it too, give deference to agencies. If the agency says this is the way we interpret the law and this is what we want to do, the courts are kind of supposed to defer to that. Well, about a year ago, the United States Supreme Court overturned that in the federal system. So you don't just get to walk in as an agency and say, well, this is our view of the law, Judge. We're the agency, we're the experts, side with us, and the court is supposed to not just do that anymore, which is kind of what they did in these Supreme Court cases. They said, you're the OTA, you're the turnpike builders, we're just going to go with you. So our idea is going to be, when these new routes are announced, it may take eminent domain cases, we may find a way to make a case before then, is we would like to be able to go to state courts, and we may have an avenue to take this case this time to federal court, because what we're going to say is we're going to say that the statute that lets the OTA go to the Supreme Court directly and say, tell us whether we can do these bond issues or not. We're going to say that statute is in some ways unconstitutional. That even though the Supreme Court decided against us that time, that with new people who weren't involved in the last cases, with new people who are now in the route who weren't before, those people can come to court and say, that case was wrongly decided, and we get to come before a new court and show that we're in the right and the OTA is in the wrong. So that's kind of the theory there, and it's a ways off, but also know we have a chance. And once again, with this new South Extension route, we hope this is not going to be just about eminent domain, waving the white flag, letting them take your land, and trying to get the best deal you can. Now, that may be what it ends up being if we lose the case again. But the idea is to come in an eminent domain case or otherwise and just say the OTA can't do this, period. And if you've looked around and followed what's going on in eminent domain and farms and ranches and rural areas lately, you see the tide kind of turning. It used to be if someone who had the power of eminent domain under a statute came and wanted to take your land and put a power line, a road, or whatever, the courts didn't question it. But more and more, you're seeing challenges to people to government powers or utilities or someone else being able to take lands. And I think we can take advantage of that some and be able to say in the courts, and maybe in the court of public opinion is where we win it, even if not in the courts, you can't just take land because the statute says you can. You have to really prove necessity, and you don't get to build a turnpike or a high-speed highway just because you say you can. The statutes really have to say that. And what we want to do for those of you who are going to be impacted by a new route is we kind of want to say, like we did the last time, hey, we've got your back. We need to organize as a large group. We need to pool resources. We need to make sure that you as a landowner are not off there by yourself being picked off by the OTA. Probably the reason that we know that the route may be between 48th and 60th are these contacts that the OTA is doing to try to make deals, months or years in advance with landowners to see if they can buy up land before anyone can do anything about it. And then there's nothing you can do to them all of a sudden because they don't even have to file eminent domain cases. But what we want to do is make sure you understand, as a landowner who doesn't want this turnpike to come through, that we all need to organize. We all need to stay together. We all need to have each other's back. I don't think that there are any billionaires in the path that can just fund the whole thing by themselves. If there are, great, let's find them and let's see if they'll help us. But we don't have to have that if we all stand together. There are ways to fight this, to continue to fight this, at the legislature, in the courts. And if the OTA does come knocking, feel free to let us know, and don't just feel powerless, like you can't do anything about it. Even if it were a case where we were to lose the challenge again, the OTA is not going to treat you fairly in the eminent domain case either. They're going to want to lowball you in the offers. They're going to not want to give you like money for moving expenses. We talked about, you heard just a minute ago, that they don't have to give displacement expenses. If you're really savvy and you get a good lawyer, you can kind of negotiate your way to that. But what they'll do is they'll come to you and they'll tell you that this is what their appraisal says and that you got to take this. Well, you don't. People who go to juries do better in eminent domain cases. And let's back up again and let's say this as a group. If you don't want the OTA to take your land, get with us and band with us and let's make a fight. And let's say, we're not going to put this turnpike through. And we're going to make law. And we're not going to let the OTA just rule us anymore. And so I think I'm getting to that point. Yes, 6:35. How about that? Right on the nose. I think it's time for us to go ahead and band together and band up. We're going to have tables together. I'll turn it over to Amy to direct traffic. But just remember, stay in the fight. Be Winston Churchill's. Don't wave the white flag. Stay together. We have plans. We have arguments. We have ways to do this. We have ways to beat these turnpikes. And if we keep doing it, we can win.
Thanks, Rob. And I want to reiterate that. Thank you. He's worked tirelessly for the community and us. And we have some other great lawsuit ideas too, and I'd love to talk to you about that. I think maybe some of us should go to law school, because we've been reading all the case histories, and we really think that an unelected board exacting eminent domain is unconstitutional. And there's people all over the United States that think that too, and we think a federal court case is getting ripe for that, and we'd like to work with some people from around the country to do that. And there's a court case to be had over the South Canadian over environmental non-compliance, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers allowing them to build a 7,000-foot bridge without a permit. I mean, can you build a bathroom in your house without a permit? No, you need a permit. So why does the OTA get to build a bridge without a permit? And there's lots of other avenues that we have our fingers in everything. We're trying everything. And we've been documenting what we've been doing for the past 3 years. And we hired a professional videographer and a storyteller out of Texas who worked on toll roads and beating toll roads in Texas. He has a website called Truth Be Told, TOLLED. His name is William Molina. We want to show you a trailer from our upcoming documentary that was just picked up by a film festival in Houston, and we're going to screen it as a community together in June if you're interested in coming to see that. And we hope you like it. And after that, we're going to break up into tables. There'll be people sitting in the back, and you can come up and ask us anything. And please do sign up for our newsletter. Sign up for the Substack. So it's Amy Serrato at Substack. And if you have any questions or you have to leave, Kelly has these cards you can write us, and we're working on putting together a frequently asked questions section. And in my Substack today, I answered one of the frequently asked questions from the last town hall, and we'll keep going with that. All right, hope you like the trailer. I want the state to stop the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority from building any new turnpikes. We do not need to destroy anybody's homes, do not need to destroy any more environment. We don't need to destroy wildlife habitat. We do not need any more new alignments, period. We don't need them in Oklahoma, and we don't need them in the United States.
Governor Stitt, come out and meet the people whose homes will be destroyed.
You can't have it. You can't have our homes. You can't have our land. You can't have our way of life.
No eminent domain to build more toll roads.
Stay away. LTAs.
Hundreds of families thrown out of their homes. Hundreds of homes destroyed. $5 billion of debt piled on top of the 1.7 that already
This
exists.
has nothing to do with engineering. This has nothing to do with we need a road. This has nothing to do with we have too much traffic congestion, we need a road. This has everything to do with money.
They build turnpikes because they can, not because they need to.
The OTA is not even asking for authorization. They just want to go build it and use, magic language to get it done.
The route authorized by the legislature went like this. The route they want to build goes like this.
It's not even allowing the legislature. We are allowing an agency, an administrative entity, to have so much power that it's almost to the point of being a rogue agency.
They wanted to build this. This is not some parlor game that construction companies play and that politicians play. This is real life. And you can't expect people to just sit back and take it.
What they're doing is not lawful. The OTA is an agency without proper legal guardrails.
It's just the lack of involvement from the other government agencies.
The only reason they're getting away with it is with the cooperation of politicians and bankers.
If anyone tells you these turnpikes are a done deal, you tell them no. These turnpikes are a dead deal.
No studies have been done, no environmental studies, no human impact studies, none. The environment raped and wildlife driven away. Lots of talk, no studies, yet the route has already been chosen.
The best case scenario, this turnpike gets stopped.
What these guys are doing is like, how do they expect to get away with it? Because they've been getting away with it.
All right, well, we've got more where that came from, and the whole thing will make you go crazy, cry, scream, and want to continue that fight. So we really want you to stay involved. We really want you to ask some questions. We've got experts all over the room. We've got engineers and CPAs and lawyers and everything in between that can help answer your questions. Thank you for coming, and stay in touch. And if you can't stay and you want to get home, please do leave us a question and your name, and we'll get you on that newsletter and the Substack to keep you informed.
This last portion of the meeting is designed for you guys to come up and speak with these people one-on-one to ask specific questions about your property and your situation, and anything that you need clarification on that maybe we just didn't clear up in the presentation. So anyway, that's what's going on there. And one other thing, the documentary, part of the reason we haven't been able to release it yet, even though it's been finished for almost a year, is because it has been nominated for, it was a finalist in one of the film festivals that we entered it into. We should be finding out the results to that in the next week or so. So once all of those film festivals that we entered them into have come and gone, and either we won or we didn't, once those are all finished, then we'll be able to release it to the public, and we'll have a big showing, a big, premiere or whatever, which should be lots of fun. So anyway, I think that was it. Is there anything else I forgot? Anybody else? Anything?
If you do get contacted by the OTA, please email admin, ADMIN, at pikeoffota.com and let us know. So if you get a letter that they want to come survey on your land, if you get a letter that they want to come talk to you about eminent domain, if you get contacted, and when you talk to them, you need to buy a recording device, okay? You need to have a recording device and record everything. Please, because we've found out in the last 3 years that they tell one person one thing and they tell another person another thing, and they try to pit neighbor versus neighbor. So you need to protect yourselves in that way. All right, let's ask some questions. I look forward to meeting everyone.